Bitcoin doing Bitcoin things. Crypto is cryptoing. And of course, the man himself, Wafdawg, is in the building. Put your hands up, ladies and gentlemen. We can't see you at home, but we absorb your energy and it helps us host this show. What is up, everybody? Happy Monday. Welcome to BossDawgs. Waf, how are you doing?
Happy Monday, man. Doing very well. Bitcoin hit 70K today. I think we're in the everything is pumping except ordinals and runes phase of the cycle. Trying to catch those floors, to catch the lows. But just still, despite all that joking aside, so much bullish news coming out this past weekend. I don't even know where to begin, but there's just so many things to start with. Bitcoin is on the world stage now, and things can only be looking up from here, I would say.
I definitely agree with you there, Waf. And, I think we can go a little macro level today. Where's Shaggy when you need him? But let's talk about it. I know Jake did a great rundown on Wake and Jake. Big shout out to him. But, definitely want to hear your opinions, Waf, on just everything. Talk about Bitcoin convention over the weekend. Hear your thoughts and takeaways on that. What are your thoughts, depending on election results? We'll keep that not political, but we can talk about some of the different possibilities that we might be seeing. And then, of course, we can circle back to runes and ordinals and say, is this it? Is that game over, a wrap? Or, do we think we're going to get some flows at some point? But definitely want to kick off today's episode just talking about the weekend. What were some of the big headlines, big news items that you thought were significant from the conference?
I mean, first and foremost, obviously the Donald Trump keynote speech was probably the speech that garnered the most attention. Donald Trump talking about holding that 210,000 Bitcoin that the government has confiscated and hold it as a strategic reserve. I think Senator Loomis went even further, saying that she wants to see the Federal Reserve purchase 800,000 Bitcoin over the next 4 years, and to hold it in order to pay off the national debt. And I think Michael Saylor, I don't know if you had a chance to see his speech or his slides. I mean, he was probably like the most bullish out of all of them. And he went through some math on how the United States government could like have up to like 30 trillion in a surplus over a 21-year period if they like instituted sort of like his micro strategy, but at the government level. So I think those were probably the three key speakers. I mean, I guess you can include RFK if you want. But to me, the takeaway was Bitcoin is really getting sort of like that widespread attention. The adoption is gonna be a game of like who does it first. So there's this game theory that we had spoke about before. So like now that United States has kind of like kind of led with the announcement. If I was another country, I'd front run America and like go buy some Bitcoin. That's like probably number one thing I would do. Um, and then the other things I would say to take away besides that is maybe perhaps it's no longer going to be a bipartisan type of I guess issue where we had congressional Democrats like write a letter to Kamala Harris and mentioning that they want a different stance on crypto versus what they're currently getting with Elizabeth Warren. So I do think there is a little bit of grift. The grift is real. Like we are a voting bloc that's could potentially sway the elections in one way or the other. So I think they are vying for our attention, but at the same time, there are some real tangible things that could potentially come out of this that I think is only super bullish for the future. What was your thoughts on the weekend?
Yeah, wow. Pretty much lockstep with what your views were. I definitely will take some of it with a grain of salt, particularly from Michael Saylor. He for sure has reason to be bullish, and he made a huge bet just by running MicroStrategy and it becoming one of the biggest holders of Bitcoin in the world. He's obviously profited, enormously off of it, but again, he does run a company that's entire business model is just buying and mining Bitcoin. So it does make sense that he's touting this as a solution. So I think it's always interesting at these types of events, the hype and the price reaction that comes from it. We had Bitcoin a couple of weeks ago drop below 60K. It got to mid 50s, and now it's back up to touching 70 today, and now selling off a little bit. So I was a little going into the event was wondering, is this going to be a sell the news kind of event? If Trump does announce a strategic reserve, how much of that is already priced in? It seems like it's somewhat priced in, given that the price didn't explode. But we'll still have to see what happens. We've seen throughout the course of this year the sell the news events kind of happen in a couple different waves and phases. Notably, we saw the Bitcoin ETF get approved. It sold off and trended sideways for a couple of weeks and then absolutely ripped over the next couple of months. So totally agree with you. I think the U.S. announcing that it's going to do some sort of strategic reserve, even if they're not fully using that wording, them saying that they're not going to be selling the Bitcoins they have on hand and then are planning to buy more or would like to buy more. I totally agree with you. It's going to really ignite the globe in just a buying process. Where would I be a little hesitant? Again, not politically speaking, but if the Democrats do take it, they often have policies that are more environmentally oriented. Bitcoin takes an enormous amount of electricity to generate and to operate. I know Donald Trump during the conference he had some really funny quotes about electricity. I don't know if you guys saw that, but I thought it was hilarious. He was like, "Please, Mr. President, we don't want any more electricity." But he really cited using fossil fuels as a way to do that. So that would be one of my concerns if the Democrats get in office. It would be maybe more green policies that get passed might prevent that sort of sourcing of Bitcoin, at least in house. So we'll see. It's always a toss up. And then, if the Republicans get elected, there's no telling if it's going to pass legislation that's actually going to get through Senate or Congress. So as always, it's a sit back and we'll see. But in terms of just the raw sentiment out of the past couple of days here, enormously bullish. I don't think there's any way to look at it that it isn't bullish. Certainly, when you have people worrying about the strength of the dollar potentially dumping over the next couple of weeks or in months, it really does seem like Bitcoin is having that store value narrative propelled even further. So I'm super bullish over this past weekend, particularly on Bitcoin, and definitely it's one of those things where I'm not going to assign a time frame to it because I do think it's going to be a little bit more sideways and up and down until we get there. But I think if you have a 5 to 10 year thesis, you really can't go wrong with buying Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think you have to have the long-term mindset, especially when you're talking about these type of things that are coming into play. Because if there's going to be sovereign nations using Bitcoin as a reserve, that means pension funds are going to be buying Bitcoin, and these are like guys who constantly bid Bitcoin and they're not selling. They're holding for long-term horizons, like 5 years out, 10 years out, 30 years out. So in the long term, it makes a lot of sense to hold Bitcoin. And the one thing I want to say just about the overall general market is that because like if you see Ethereum hasn't really pumped like related to Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin could really decouple from the entire crypto space, because like now that Bitcoin is being viewed more as like a gold, as a digital gold, compared to I guess fundamental crypto adoption. There's like two use cases that are going on here, and Bitcoin is like the only one that fits that narrative of a sovereign wealth reserve, right? So I don't think people are gonna like line up Ethereum as a sovereign wealth reserve, or even a Solana, where I think Solana is more of like a user adoption of actually like using the blockchain and doing transactions, which are mostly shit coins and meme coins at the moment, right? But that's like the actual the use case for real crypto adoption is like what Solana is doing, where you're getting users on board. There's a lot of transactions, little transaction fees. But Bitcoin seems to now become like gold, and it could really decouple from the market. So just because Bitcoin goes up, I don't necessarily think the rest of the market goes up.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you there, Waf. And something I've mentioned earlier in the year is that I think crypto as a whole is largely oversaturated. I think there's just too much stuff that's propped up. And I can give a good example, at least in the shitcoin territory, is we had this Nero sort of saga that played out over the weekend, and it really just got a lot of the influencer cabal involved, a lot of, community kind of cabal versus community narratives that formed around it. You sort of have this coin that was touted as the new Doge. Something like that, I feel like if that came out 4 to 5 months ago, it would have gone pretty quickly into the hundreds of millions of dollars on market cap, right? And obviously that's just speculation and, can't really have a hypothetical like that. But if you look at stuff that came out during the time, like Slurf and Book of Meme, things that came out and overnight went to 1 billion. You had Ansem's Cat. At one point, Hobbs come out and reach like $120 million valuation in like a day. Things are really having lower highs in terms of those overnight market caps. You can also talk about Blast if you want to cite what the expectations of that were versus its actual performance. It seems like the highs of brand new entrants in the market aren't as high. And I just think a lot of that is because we're so spread thin. So when you have this thesis, like you're saying, of Bitcoin decoupling and just moving, with the other market not in tandem, would completely agree with you. It's an absolute possibility because a lot of the value that is in these other coins has been so propped up. So I think it's likely that a lot of these things that had narratives months ago, there's not really as much going on. I really wouldn't be surprised if we see people start selling those types of assets and going into something like Bitcoin because it's a much cleaner and clearer thesis, right? You're seeing global adoption. You're seeing the U.S. government directly say, "I'm going to buy Bitcoin." Plans to buy it over the next 4 years. Like those are the kinds of things, like you're saying, people are going to want to front run it. So why mess around with meme coins? Obviously, there's higher upsides in meme coins, but if your meme coin is already kind of stalled out and these new coins on the block are only hitting $50 million market caps, I couldn't blame you if you sold that and bought some Bitcoin. So definitely agree with you, man. I think we might start seeing Bitcoin rip while the rest of the market drips at some point here.
Yeah, I mean, it's like people leaving the casino and, are the laser eyes maxis right? I mean, like they're like dunking on us right now. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, we're like pretty spread out. I think the market has to pick winners and losers. There's too many ghost chains out there. There's not these ecosystems and blockchains that are earning fees to like warrant their market cap or their FDV. So like if you look at Ethereum right now, the transactions are like almost non-existent. I saw a statistic today that said Solana's uh, transaction fees are higher than Ethereum and all L2s combined, which is like insane to me. So, and then as ETH is not getting burnt through transactions, it becomes inflationary again. So that the whole deflation case surrounding Ethereum is now like debunked, right? And then now that you have it moved into the ETF, like it's just kind of like parked there and there's no transaction. So I just think, I mentioned it last week. I think ETH is like in a spot where it needs to decide like what it is. It seems like to be confused. It's trying to be like a half Bitcoin and a half Solana. It needs to like decide what it's going to be. And I don't think it really competes with Bitcoin. And if it doesn't compete with Solana either, it's going to probably be like, the loser of the cycle, I want to say. And that's somebody who's come from Ethereum and, I don't think it's like going to zero or anything like that. I just think it's going to lag. And, yeah, I mean, that's kind of like my takeaways from the conference. There was some other technical things out there that I want to say were also in the conference. Like there was a lot of L2s out there on Bitcoin. So I do think there's going to be a Bitcoin DeFi season at some point. There's a lot of L2s in competition. There's going to be some winners, some losers there again, because not all the L2s can thrive. I mean, we see it on Ethereum as like case in point. So maybe Merlin might be worth a look again as sort of like the one with the the head start, and then maybe Stacks as well. But there's a lot of other competitors out there, and I did see this one company named Babylon, which is basically like an eigenlayer. It's like a restaking Bitcoin type of staking mechanism on Bitcoin on L1. That's going to be interesting coming out later this year. And then the last thing I saw that was kind of funny was like, so to your point about like energy and cost of energy and all that stuff, there's like a mining company and they're using like the heat they generate from mining Bitcoin to heat hot tubs. So I thought that was kind of cool and interesting at the show too. So those are kind of like my main takeaways from the show. Macro level looks really good. And then like currently on the short term horizon for, our bags, our runes and our ordinals, not so much.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Short term time horizon, I think it's time to, call it how we see it. We always try to on this show, and ordinals are just not looking super hot. And it's not just, ordinals, it's really NFTs in general. And even though ordinals are differentiated between traders like ourselves, where we know, okay, it's, technically something different than an NFT, or you can give it the ordinal classification, the market's going to view it exactly the same as an NFT. And the question in terms of value and where to place your money, again, this late in the game where a lot of things are propped up, is it's what is the value thesis of these ordinals? Definitely, if you want to talk about what was the hypothesis behind NFTs in 2021 on Ethereum, a lot of it had to do with history on chain. We talked about seeing some collections in art museums, and we've seen some of that stuff play out. But a lot of that hype, a lot of those speculative flows have already kind of died off. And then same with ordinals. The same narrative came, Bitcoin's at $1 trillion+ market cap. It's bigger than Ethereum. It's bigger than every other chain combined. Shouldn't these ordinals be higher than NFTs? And they briefly were. They really had their time in the sun. Do I think it'll go back? I think at some point. I certainly think runes have a better case than NFTs, but I do think a lot of that infrastructure still needs to be built out, and a lot of it just has to do with markets and participants. I did some reading over the weekend just by Mark Douglas, Trading in the Zone. Shout out to Fibonacci. He recommends that book and his field report. He just talks about how markets can reach as high or as low as participants in the market think they're going to reach. So in the terms of ordinals and NFTs, it really does come down to, are there more participants in the market who are going to enter and buy it? And I think with something like Bitcoin, there's only so many people who know about ordinals, who are even aware they exist. And then those people all have to be actively funneling money into the market. And at a certain point, if there's no new person to come in and buy the bags, those prices kind of come down. And we saw that with Ethereum too, right? Like just constantly, we're so early, but then eventually, hey, we're so early, but there's no new users joining. So do I think users will join again? Of course, with major news with crypto and it becoming a global economy and then potentially a United States reserve, you're going to see a lot more people get involved in crypto and start buying Bitcoin and Ethereum and everything else. But is that going to happen today or tomorrow? Probably not. It's going to take some time. So I think, as always, it's just you really want to have your money in the long-term plays, at least here. If you're going to be trading short term, I would probably just look to make flips rather than buying new projects and holding them. Even stuff like we talked about last week, like Aeons, they had a really hype mint. The art looked great. It just kind of fell flat, right? It's back to still over mint price, but it's not doing well, all things considered. And again, I don't think it's like a collection that's going to stand the test of time. I think it's just a very flash in the pan kind of project, and I think that's just where ordinals are as a whole. I'm personally not jumping out of my chair to buy stuff, even the top collections like we talked about. Quantum Cat's still holding strong just because of Taproot Wizards, but Node Monkeys are down pretty bad. I know Puppets are down pretty bad right now. This isn't to be doom and gloom. This is just how I'm seeing the market. I think we're going to need to see Bitcoin explode upwards and then start to see some speculation and some new users join ordinals before we can see the reversal and have those projects rise again.
Yeah, I think we're in an extremely oversold territory right now. But like, because even Quantum Cats, it had like a $1.6 million sweep over the weekend, and it's still down 3.4% for the week, which is insane to me. And then you got the Puppets are down almost 30% in a week. That's like significant, downward pressure on the ordinals. Node Monkeys too, 20%. So like, I don't know if this is like they're down this much because of liquidium as well, because let's talk about that, because now people are lending their ordinals for Bitcoin and at a high APY, and should somebody default on the loan, then the lender gets the collateral, and maybe they just turn around and floor it on the marketplace, and it's kind of creating that downward pressure on prices, kind of like similar to what we've seen on Blur, right, with bidding. So not exactly the same, but similar downward pressure on prices nonetheless. And same thing with runes, man. It just seemed like this week there's been a massive sell-off. If you look at like oscillators, I think the market is just extremely oversold. If you've been holding, it's hard to say what to do. I don't know if you want to sell at these extreme lows. I would think at a minimum a dead cat bounce is coming, even if if you want to get out, I'd wait for that dead cat bounce. I think eventually the market will turn around. I just don't know when. Um, we need market participants. You know, it's sort of like risk off, and these are like the riskiest risk on assets that you could potentially hold right now. Um, and with Bitcoin's narrative being so strong, people are just saying, you know what, I'm going to convert these back to Sats, and I'm just going to hold Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I mean, I certainly don't blame him. I know we talked a couple of weeks ago where I said I was going to sell off my $1 billion cat just because I thought the Billy on Solana narrative was better. And I just keep seeing Solana having the market dominance right now where it's almost in my mind like, why fight it, right? The really only thing that I'm holding Zbit, Blue Bitcoin, because I do think that they're building an infrastructure. They've already shown that they're capable of that. Satoshi Nakamoto, just because I never sold it, have that since mint. I mean, it's such an OG rune, so I think that's just a bet on rune's ecosystem over time. And then, obviously Wizard, which I've talked about ad nauseum, but we're still waiting on Magic Internet Money. I do think if that rune coin comes out, it's just such a no-brainer coin that could actually captivate the masses. Maven's bot still just kind of fucking around. Not really sure when he's gonna launch that migration, if ever. But yeah, I mean, across the board, like you said, everything is sold off massively. Um, it's confusing. I certainly would say it's confusing, but it is interesting to see how Solana meme coins are still holding up for the most part. They're obviously pulled back from their all-time highs, but there's still just so much volume over there. And we just continue to see Ethereum and Bitcoin NFTs just kind of fade into the abyss here. So not sure. I have seen some flows go to Ethereum L2s. Arbitrum's actually leading by quite a bit. I thought it would have been Base. Base is still getting a decent amount of flows over the past couple of months. But yeah, still waiting on Ethereum L2s to heat up. I do think Ethereum L2s and a network that's known for NFTs, if we can see NFT trading do well on one chain, I think a lot of that would be transient across other chains. So I think we're just kind of waiting for that shift in narrative and see that other people are making money trading the digital assets again to have that shift back over. I think until then, people are probably just going to stick to what's working, and it's still meme coins for right now. It's a pretty cutthroat game over there. I certainly don't trade it too often unless there's a notable ticker, and it happens very fast. But it still seems like that's where all the day-to-day traders are making most of their money right now.
Oh yeah, completely agree. Like if you're using like bull X and you're watching coins launch, like that's where the money is, but that's also a way you could get wrecked. It's definitely like a PvP type of situation there. Like unless you just want to get into, I guess, more solidified meme coins on Solana, like the whiffs and the bonks of the world, but you're not going to get rich overnight. You're not going to hit 100x at this point. So that's kind of like where we're at. And then also I always like to compare my emotions to like where we're at on the Wall Street cheat sheet psychology of a market cycle. And I feel like runes and ordinals with this drop kind of feels like it's the panic area and capitulation. I think like just this is sort of like potentially not the full bottom. Like people will get angry after a while. People start feeling angry and then they'll be depressed and then there'll be, sort of like a rally. So again, that kind of like lines up with end of year recovery. And I think that's still like kind of like my thesis that I expect to see similar to like last year with what happened with ordinals and what happened with BRC20s. The same thing is going to play out this year where I see probably like a October timeframe we start seeing like some recovery and then it starts getting a little silly come like November, December.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there, Waf. And I mean, honestly, what's interesting is, the election is going to be taking place in November. So I definitely think based on reporting and how the projections of the election look, you're going to see a lot of volatility in crypto. Again, I just want to emphasize this for everyone in chat. MVHQ, we're not taking a political stance in any way, shape, or form. Obviously, politics and the outcomes of elections do influence crypto, which is why we're discussing them here. But any statements that we're going to make in this conversation does not reflect our beliefs about political system, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, if there is a scenario where towards the end of the year in November or so, it looks like the Democrats are going to take the election, I really wouldn't be surprised if we start to see some sell-offs. And a lot of that, again, is just because Trump has positioned himself as a very pro-crypto figurehead. He's saying all these things about creating strategic reserves, about firing Gary Gensler day one. So that stuff is definitely factored into the market. And I know currently he is projected to win. If Kamala announces her VP, if they continue to campaign well and the projections change, I really think we're going to see a crazy year. coming up towards the end of the year here, just purely based on the election. So it'll be very interesting to see. I don't really have an opinion one way, shape, or form, but I know it's going to be crazy and volatile for sure.
Yeah, I like to like get to a place where it doesn't matter who gets elected, but right now it does seem like if Trump gets elected, that we're gonna be looking better from a crypto perspective. I did want to note though, like after his keynote speech at Nashville, he had another speech at St. Cloud, Minnesota, and I wanted to see like if he was gonna mention anything about Bitcoin during that speech when he was mentioning the economy. And he did it. So I don't know if it's like we're just in this little bubble and we're just like, we hang on all these politicians' words when it comes to crypto. But when he was out there with a bigger audience, like there was no mention of Bitcoin. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. So I don't know if we're like putting more importance on the cause and effect, or the effect if it's a Democrat or Republican on crypto, or is it just gonna be our normal cycle anyway? Like, so it's all speculation at the end of the day. But I still think that right now, like the talk is good. We just need, I guess, like you said, more participants. So that's kind of has to happen, on a large scale, even for Bitcoin to be adopted.
Yeah, and that's where, I mean, I think it's going to take off like a bullet train whenever it does happen, right? Because to your point, people are going to try to front run the US. The US, probably before they even announce the strategic reserve, would start acquiring Bitcoin, I would imagine, because, you're not going to want to announce it to the world and then like have the price go up 20% overnight and then have to pay 20% more. Although everything's on chain, so people would be able to find out if they confirm the US's address there. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. And, just circling back to Michael Saylor, he has a lot of incentives in saying those kinds of things, right? It really benefits him and his holdings. And then same thing with any politician, regardless of their side on the political spectrum. If they're going to get voters from being pro crypto, they'll say it, right? Like there's plenty of times when politicians will say things and then don't follow through. Again, I'm not making a political stance on either party here. Let me just again set the record there. But we can't necessarily take all these things at face value. People say things and they don't always follow through. But when you do have this many expectations, and it is a matter of how can we get approval ratings and get things through, the more it gets talked about, the more people that get behind it, the easier it is for this kind of legislation to pass. So I definitely think we're moving in the right direction on both sides. It seems like more and more people are advocating for it and banging the drum. So I think when that thing does finally happen and they do announce, hey, there's a strategic reserve, the US is going to buy a lot of crypto. I really think it's going to send crypto into the stratosphere. And it could be that new kind of bull run where, similar to ETH 2021, there was just so many new market participants, money was falling out of the sky. Not sure if that's only going to benefit raw Bitcoin, people holding Bitcoin right now. Or are you just going to get a nice 20 to 30 to 40% bump? Probably. But, with that profit that you're making, you usually see people with crazy amounts of profits in a year spend that elsewhere. So I do expect to see some trickle down and some network effects once that happens. But, time frame, definitely TBD.
Yeah, I mean, I think politics aside, like if you just look at the traditional crypto cycle, we are in a bull. We are still debasing the currency, right? Like the Fed is still printing money, like that the debt is up only. Rate cuts are still coming in September, like essentially almost at 100% like probability at this point, with like a 10% probability on a 50 basis point cut, and then like 80 plus on a 25 basis point cut. So we are getting cheaper money coming as soon as September. Um, whether whoever is president is gonna be largely spending money, whether it's Kamala or Trump. The deficit's gonna probably be upwards of $2 to $3 trillion annually. So we're just gonna keep adding to the debt, and that's what works best for crypto. Really, it's the low interest rates, it's the debasement of the currency. It's what makes crypto go up, and those factors are still there. And I just think like right now there's a lot of open interest out there. There's a lot of shorts, and they always say like Binance kind of controls the Bitcoin price. So at some point, like they're just gonna like stop putting out shorts, and then the price is gonna fly. And it's just more. It's probably like a month or two away, and then it's gonna happen. And then when we get closer to 100K, then I think that's when, and that, because that's such a big number and it's such a, I don't know, it's such a huge number. And like from like that sovereign level, 100K Bitcoin, I feel like that's where the game theory really begins. Who's going to now really put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, on the sovereign level? Who's gonna put it in their strategic reserves? Because it's gonna be 100K. It's gonna be massive. It just sounds like more valuable at 100K than it does at 70K. I just think that's like where like the fireworks really begin.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, man. I mean, we've seen it tons of times in crypto. People love the round numbers, they like the big numbers. So really agree on the hypothesis of just Bitcoin as a store of value. Definitely agree. We know that a rate cut is coming, so it'll be cheaper to borrow money. If the value of the dollar gets debased, then certainly makes sense to invest in something with a finite supply and a global impact. So we'll see. I mean, it really seems like it's a straightforward thesis, but even as much as, 2 years ago, Bitcoin kind of nosedived and hit 16K briefly after NFTs kind of died off there. Don't exactly remember what the catalyst was. Just it all kind of happened during the COVID blur years, but we'll see. I know a lot of times expectations, things kind of shake out differently, but it seems almost like too certain that it would go up for it to fail. Sometimes it does. That's how it happens, but we'll definitely see. I did want to share screen here for a little Boss Dogs show and tell. We haven't done one of these in a while, but big shout out here to Blizzard Capital. He is the metrics man himself, and he told me over the weekend about Artemis.xyz. So I'll give you guys a moment here if you want to hop on in, but we'll do a little screen share and just kind of break down some daily active users and just look at metrics. Again, this is app.artemis.xyz. Really awesome place to just kind of pop around and get a look at some different dashboards that are populated here. Haven't heard about Artemis, so again, to Lizard Capital, he's the man. And yeah, we just get some really awesome insights looking at this. So just wanted to first and foremost share daily active addresses. You'll see Solana is just dominating. It's about 2 million daily active users and sub 500K. The other chains I have pulled up here are Solana, Bitcoin, I have Stacks, and I have Ton. And I have a couple of those. The main thing I want to talk about is Ethereum, Solana, and Bitcoin, but we will get into Stacks on here in just a second. But if you're looking at daily active users, it is really crazy to me just how many more users are over on Solana versus something like Ethereum or Bitcoin. And I'm not really surprised with something like Bitcoin because there's just not as much to do, to be honest. Right? You're talking about stuff to do on the day to day. You're really going to be looking at Solana where there's new coins coming out all the time. On Bitcoin, there are pockets where it's very active, but for the most part, you're pretty much just holding or buying an ordinal or rune. Hasn't been a lot with ordinals and runes lately, so you're pretty much just going to be holding Bitcoin. Again, in daily transactions, it's just Solana dominance. You'll see here over total volume locked, Ethereum has a ton locked. I don't think that this Bitcoin number is accurate over here for total volume locked, but across the board, Solana is just surpassing all of these chains. And what's interesting here is that in fees, Solana here for one of the first times ever is starting to trend up and have more daily fees than Ethereum, which is pretty crazy just in terms of a market cap and speculative positioning. And I'm just bringing this up, Waf, because, as we go weeks and weeks where there's just not a lot of action on Bitcoin, I do want to still have our thoughts as traders carried in these episodes. And, I know you and I talked last week about just Solana as a potential value play. I know Jake and Bake brought it up this morning on the Wake and Jake show, but you just see the strength in Solana over the weekend whenever there's a crypto pop. I think given its market cap and just seeing its dominance over every other chain, is Solana undervalued here? I'm inclined to say yes.
Oh, absolutely. Right now, Solana dominance has hit like 3.6%, which is it's like its all-time high. And it's just been gaining like on Ethereum, and Ethereum is like needs to drop. And I think there's gonna be sort of like ETH coming down and Solana going up, and maybe they meet somewhere in the middle, or Solana just becomes like a larger percentage of it. Because like here, I mean, here's the proof. Look at all the daily active addresses and the daily transactions on Solana, and it's producing more fees than Ethereum and all the L2s combined. I mean, so Solana is basically eating Ethereum's lunch right now. This is like the real flippening that we need to be talking about. And I think it just passed BNB just recently because their market caps are very similar right now, Solana and BNB.
Yeah, and right now, as of July 28th, it looks like Ethereum has a $393 billion market cap and Solana just under 90. So, I mean, factored by a 4x valuation on Ethereum, but Solana is eating Ethereum's lunch now, larger fee structure, and just almost 5 times the amount of daily active users. It's pretty crazy. I definitely think in terms of corporate uses, Ethereum has a better EVM, or in terms of just where they're storing the data. Obviously, there's been issues where Solana has gone offline. We do know that Solana is technically a centralized network, but in terms of what people use Solana for, which is just trading digital assets, doesn't really matter, right? People aren't super concerned about like, I need everything to be on chain. I need all of my transactions with this added layer of security or privacy. I certainly do think each crypto chain has its own use case for it. It seems like Bitcoin has very clearly established what that is. And just over the past year and a half, Solana has absolutely carved that out. It just really makes sense from a trading infrastructure. It's going to be interesting to see what Ethereum does with its L2s, if that competes with Solana. But even some of those Ethereum L2s that we've used, I personally sometimes prefer Solana over it. It is just instantaneous with such low fees. So just looking at these charts and just continuing to see the daily active users on Solana trend up, it to me really does seem like a decent opportunity here, as people speculate, as the world gets more bullish on crypto. Obviously, it's a game of comps, but like if you have Bitcoin leading the charge here, if that becomes a global currency standard, you're going to see people speculate into crypto. And it's a really easy conclusion to draw of just, well, Solana has more users, more people are, taking part in this ecosystem than Ethereum. Why is it worth the price?
It's funny because like on 4th of July, I think Solana hit a low of maybe 127, and it's already up to like 190. So it's got like a 50% gain in just under 3.5 weeks. So I'm always like nervous to buy in a big amount after a move like that, but it needs to catch up. I think it's like being recognized now that there needs to be a catch up versus Ethereum in this whole market. I just saw Clemente. I don't know if you're familiar with Clemente. He's on that Daily Bone podcast with Pio and Nick O'Neill, and he put out a tweet today where he got rid of all his ETH on Blast and put it all into Solana. And I swear to God, I had that same idea this morning that I was going to do the same thing. But since he posted about it, I was like, you know what? I probably shouldn't do it. This might be an overreaction at this point in time. But maybe at some point where Solana price pulls back, like it's not a bad idea. I just don't know why having Ethereum on any L2 makes sense right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Af. And, audience, feel free to chime in if you're an ETH believer, if you're a Sol believer. Definitely want to hear what you guys are seeing and believing right now. Wow, if you'd be shocked, maybe not shocked, but like if you could see my AVO price chart for Solana, it is just a limit buy every $5 that it drops. I'm just like, whatever the price is on Solana, I don't care. I'm going to buy it. If it goes down to $80, I'm just going to keep buying it. Like it's just one of those things where I don't really care to time the dip. So I'm just going to have a buy all the way down to zero. I just think it's such a good thesis at this point, along with Bitcoin. So I'm pretty bulled up on Solana. Things tend to oscillate a little bit here. I definitely think Solana popped up a lot over the past week, so we might see a bit of a pullback. I know Fib said he did some research over the weekend, and we might see crypto sell a little bit here. So we'll see how it plays out, but I definitely really like the Solana play for the future. But I do have two more chains to talk about here. We got Stacks and we have Ton. Stacks is the name that stood out to me because I did some research over the weekend, saw it on Artemis, have it going on the stream here. If you're not on the stream, if you want to pop in real quick, feel free. But we're in Artemis, which again, pretty badass, really easy to use. Just got to click around a little bit and you'll find some cool metrics to go off of. But if you're looking at Stacks here, what I found doing some research on Artemis is that this is a decentralized application layer for Bitcoin. And that's at least what they're trying to develop. And obviously, when we're talking about dApps, that's stuff that we've seen plenty of times on Solana and Ethereum. We have not seen that on Bitcoin at all. As far as apps, right? They have Magic Eden supporting Bitcoin assets. We have a few websites like Unisat and Scribe. Most of them pretty crappy UI UX, and a theme just over and over and over again on the BossDawgs show is As infrastructure gets built out, as the user experience improves, there will be more people who come over to ordinals and runes and Bitcoin. So looking at stacks here, a minuscule amount of daily users. It is 1.7 thousand daily users. That is nothing for crypto. Pretty much no revenue to be talking of, very small amount of fees. And if you look at the market cap on stacks here, is about 2.9 billion compared to Bitcoin's market capital of 1.2 to 1.3 trillion dollars. Looking at plays here, this is something I'm keeping my eye on. I'm not buying any stacks quite yet. I'm not, speculating into it. You can see that it's really just been in this range of about $2 for the past couple of months here. But yeah, for me, this is something that was really interesting because if they do continue to build this out and we start to see that application network for Bitcoin actually succeed, I think stacks would be a great investment. And, other chains are building. There really haven't been too many others that have succeeded. Had a lot of high hopes for Merlin. They really dropped the ball. But this is one that I really wanted to bring up on the show just because it is early. I still need to dive deeper into it. And again, I'm not pulling the trigger quite yet. But I would say if we start to see this chain increase its dominance and we do see useful apps on Bitcoin get developed on stacks, it could be in a no-brainer territory at, sub 5 billion market cap.
Full disclosure, I do own stacks. This is like this is the original L2, one of the original L2s on Bitcoin. The problem with it was that even though it was an L2, it was extremely slow transaction confirmation times. But I do know recently they had like a Satoshi Nakamoto upgrade to like increase that. I haven't used it in quite a while. I know people in the Ordinals chat have minted the STX 20s inscriptions like way back in, I want to say probably November, December of last year. And those did really well. And that probably got them a lot of users. And at that point in time, their market cap probably reached like 5 billion and the STX token was approaching $4. And then it's kind of given it all back. So they have been actively developing on this chain. I guess this could be potentially one of the L2 winners. Besides Merlin chain, this one's been around like way longer. And they've just been building and developing. So it is probably one of the ones, if you want to place a bet on an L2, that this is one I would allocate towards an L2 bet on Bitcoin.
Dang, great insight there, Waf. Definitely appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, I know with all of Bitcoin, it moves pretty slowly as an ecosystem because there's a lot more to figure out. But there is a tight knit community of people who work on it. I've heard they're trying to bring back Opcat, which is a function in writing some Bitcoin related code. I don't really know enough about it. I'm not a programmer, so feel free if anyone in the chat knows more about Opcat and the return of Opcat, which a lot of people are calling for. Feel free to shout it out. But yeah, definitely, one to keep an eye on. Definitely if you're someone who likes to place some small concentrated bets and just wait and see how they pan out. It seems like stacks is a good one just from an L2 perspective. But we'll see. I mean, right now with L2s, at least on Bitcoin, there's not a huge use for them given that sats are so cheap. But if the Bitcoin network continues to get congested, if we start to see some volume like we saw a few months ago leading up to runes and directly after runes, could definitely see things popping off. But that was stacks. Why do I have tons here? Well, it's going to be $1 in the short jar for me today because once again, folks, I'm going to put the chips on the table. And I could be wrong. This is not financial advice, but I do firmly believe that Hamster Combat is a fraudulent company. The valuation is just slowly drifting higher. We're seeing about $5,000 to $10,000 of 24-hour volume over the past couple of days. It's not really going anywhere, but it is valued at $2.5 billion and Blast is valued at $1.4 billion. What the hell? They are claiming that they have 300 million users. I am here. The entire Ton network only has 355,000 active users and less than 1 million daily transactions. So the numbers don't number. The math doesn't math. I know, guys, I'm continuing to come out here with some short report kind of shit. Everyone wants me to go ballistic and bullish. I am. I'm ballistically bullish on Bitcoin and Solana. I love runes. I still think it's a great long-term thesis, but in my heart of hearts, something feels wrong with Hamster Combat. And as a member of MVHQ, they decided to give me a microphone, so I have to do my best to just scream into the abyss. I appreciate you hearing me out on this. But anyways, I wanted to plug it one more time for you, F.
Posted in scams.
I might have to, dude. All right. Well, I'm off my hamster combat soapbox. Anything else top of mind for you, Af? I know we've talked about some of the stuff over the weekend with the Bitcoin conference. We talked a little bit about some outflows on runes and ordinals. We've talked about Solana, potential Bitcoin L2s, but anything else top of mind? Doesn't have to be ordinal related, could be anything crypto.
I want to say the only thing I've done like this past week was I probably added a little bit to my wizard bag because I saw it go down to like $2.15. And the other thing I've been doing, I've just been lending on Liquidium. So just trying to farm those points and just gain some yield on some Bitcoin. Unfortunately, these ordinal prices have gone down, so it'll be interesting to see come like next weekend. Will I get paid back my Bitcoin plus interest, or will I just be purchasing a lot of puppets? I guess that's TBD. We'll see. Well, at least if I do purchase them, they'll be at a lower price. Due to defaults and stuff. So that's all I'm doing right now. Just gonna farm this points. It's like 2 months, a 2 month season to farm, and that's it. Gonna be sitting on my hands and just watching the market. I don't think I have an immediate rush to get into anything else. There were some upcoming mints this week that some were pretty interesting. I know JD dropped us a list, and I had some on my list that matched up with JD's. And let me just pull up that list real quick.
Please do. And in the meantime, shout out to JD. Really can't shout him out enough, man. Really do appreciate it. JD, before every episode, sends WAF and I a list of upcoming mints. He posts all the time and time sensitive. So if you have a bless that you haven't used yet for the day, please feel free to show JD some love and throw him some blesses there. He really does go above and beyond for the MVHQ community. He's not compensated by us in any way. So, it means a lot if you could, show some love to JD. He really just does kick ass in terms of compiling information on projects and sharing it with other members. So do want to shout him out. And JD, if you're listening back on the recording, bro, much love, dude. Super appreciate it. But all right, WAP, we got the list here. What are some projects you're looking at?
So I am looking at this Life is Crazy mint. It looks like some type of Milady's type of art. Looks pretty interesting. It's a cheap mint, so I figure like why not? And then the other one on this list that I think a lot of people probably have a mint for is this No Ordinary Kind mint from Seize Control. That one could be pretty interesting as well. So those are like sort of like the two I would highlight from this list here. Also, just shout out to JD again because we were copy pasting these links from our private chat and it wasn't working, so he figured out a way to make these links work when we copy pasted into VC Hangout. So just want to give JD another shout out on that.
Absolutely, man. And yeah, appreciate that, WAF. I think he absolutely nailed it. An additional shout there, we do have an MVHQ Endless Art mission that ends tomorrow. So feel free, that's the top link. WAF just shared that there in voice hangout chat for people listening along. So you can go ahead. But yeah, I mean, just going through here, man, I really think the Life is Crazy mint, as well as the Ordinary Kind mint, the art definitely stands out. I do think that for the No Ordinary Kind, the supply is somewhat high. They have 7,680. And this is an interesting art style. We haven't seen a lot of stuff like this. It sort of reminds me of crypto brokers. If I had to make a comparison, that was the one by Josie on Ethereum a while ago, where they had those kinds of like figures that all had jobs and different futuristic kind of outfits and stuff. But yeah, those do look pretty cool. And then I do think the Life is Crazy mint does have that Remilio Milady kind of artwork, maybe some X copy influence in there, but those look sick. There's only 2,000 of those, so I would expect those to mint out pretty quickly. Very cheap mint price on both of those. So I would say either or, if you're able to get your hands on a whitelist somehow, would mint it. Could be a quick play off of secondary. I would again say anything that's coming out in this time frame, I would not expect it to be long-term successful, but we saw with Aeons, the exact price pattern as Frux did play out. It was about 3 to 4 times off of mint within the first couple hours, pulled back a little bit, reached about 8 to 10 times what mint was, and then fell back to about 4 times mint in coming days. So it's by no means a grand slam. Again, that's not financial advice, but we have seen those patterns play out. So if you're looking for a little trading action here. Shout out to WAF and JD for sharing that information. Would definitely check those out, put them on your calendars, and potentially get some good secondary plays there. I think there should absolutely be some opportunity to make a quick profit.
Totally agree. It's like probably a good, nice little 24 to 48-hour window to trade and make some BTC. And if you're actually just more of a fan of the art, just wait a week and then buy it.
Oh man. Well, appreciate the blessings, guy. Please throw some to WAF and JD, man. They're holding down the show with the info that they're compiling every week. Anyone, if you got some blesses, throw them in WAF and JD's way. Not mandatory by any means, but all you got to do is /bless in the server. They work hard every week to keep the show running. But yeah, I think that's about it for me, WAF. I don't have too much else going on, man. I'm right there with you. Bought a little bit of Wizard over the weekend. Got chopped up on some Nero and said, hey, I gotta sit this one out. Just decided to buy some Solana instead. But other than that, just kind of sitting back and waiting for the fireworks. Anything else going on?
Same here. I'm just gonna continue to touch grass during the summer, enjoy the summer, and keep my eye on the market. And I would say throw those blessings to Ross, man. He's like the number one host of MVHQ, man. Throw him to Ross.
Appreciate it, bro. Yeah, throw them to JD. If you got stuff for me, throw them to JD. If WAF is deferring to me, I'm gonna defer to JD. He really does. Just every episode, he comes in clutch with the links in the project update. So even when we don't have insane projects quite yet on the radar, when they come, he's gonna catch them first. So just want to continue to support JD. Just make sure that he knows that we love him here and appreciate all the works he does. So definitely appreciate that. And we'll do a shout out to the audience. Just if you guys want to talk about anything, I see some familiar faces in here. I know you guys are deep in the Ordinals community and in the trenches with WAF and myself. But if there's anything top of mind, you just want to shout. You heard me go on a 2-minute rant about hamster combat. So all voices here are welcome. We'll take any perspective or take. Open floor here for the next 30 to 60 seconds. If anyone wants to, feel free, hop off mute and just chat it up with WAF.
Yeah, totally like unrelated to Bitcoin, but check out the DFS chat. Sort of like what Jake said today. Like we've been cooking in there. It's middle of best ball season. You want to get in on the action, get in on rainmakers. That's popping off, and that takes my attention away from the Ordinal and Rune Bear, and I just kind of go on to something else to bide my time, and I'm just doing a lot of drafting right now.
I'm getting pretty excited there, Waf. I have never really played a full Rainmakers football season. I've just done some trading and some pack ripping for Let's Rip, but definitely been popping in the DFS chat. And I mean, it is just popping off. Of all the threads that you'd expect to be going ham in MVHQ, that one is just hundreds of messages a day. Any sport, any event going on, there is someone in there spectating it. So a ton of fun, but also some phenomenal alpha. I mean, people in like MVHQ are cleaning up over these fantasy sports. It's insane the edge that's over there.
Yeah, for real. We have like next level talent in that chat over there. Whether it's Jake, JJ, Relic, Poop. I mean, there's just a ton of guys in there, and I know I'm leaving some people out, but even Jinzo, like everybody, guys are killing it. Tonk with his betting. I mean, like it's just so much alpha in there, and it's a lot of fun. If you're into sports, you're into that stuff. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess final note here, Waf, to round out the episode for any newer traders who might have, gone in at ordinals towards the top, maybe they got in on runes. Do you have any advice for them, just what to do during a slow market like this? If you're on the fence about do I sell, do I hold? I just know that you've traded a ton of markets for a long period of time. So I'm wondering if you have any insight for people who are looking at the price charts and they're like, shit, it's not going the way I want it to go. Like, what would you do in this situation?
I think sometimes you got to take a tough look at your portfolio and see like where you still have conviction and where you don't. And then the ones that you don't have conviction, you take your losses, you recover what you can, and you move on. And then on the items or the runals or ordinals, whatever it is for that matter, the ones that you still have conviction on, you hold or you add. If you don't feel comfortable adding, and then just hold and do nothing. But I would cut losses where you deem it's losses. Like if you don't think something is capable of coming back, then just cut your losses and move on to something that you have higher conviction on. That's what I would do. Sometimes you just gotta take a hard look at your portfolio.
Great piece of wisdom there to end the episode. As always, Waf, been an absolute pleasure, man. Appreciate chopping it up. I hope you have a great rest of your week. And to the audience, thanks as always for tuning into the Boss Dog Show. We will catch you next time.
Pleasure's all mine. Ross, have a good one too, bro.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Peace.
Peace.